Welcome to the second video for Paper 3, Weimar and Nazi Germany, and this is looking at key topic 2, which is looking at Hitler's rise to power from 1919 through to his appointment as Chancellor in 1933, and also the rise of the NSDAP, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi Party. We start with the creation of this extreme right-wing party, which was originally called the German Workers' Party or the Deutsche Arbeiter Party, DAP. And this party is initially formed in February of 1919 by the son of a railway engineer called Anton Drexler. It's formed in Munich in the German state of Bavaria in the south of Germany. And this was common. It was formed in a beer hall. And after the end of the First World War, many of these political parties formed in the beer halls in Munich, and many of them were far right, extreme right parties who were disenfranchised with the end of the war, the defeat of the First World War, but also with the rise of the new republic and the Weimar Republic as well. So Adolf Hitler is hired as a spy by the German army after the First World War. He's in disarray once he hears of the defeat in November of 1918. He's going through a period of recovery after a gas attack, and he hears the news, and he cannot comprehend that Germany has lost the war. So he ends up working for the German army, and he's sent as a spy to spy on this German Workers' Party to report back to the army on this activity. But as he attends the first meeting, Hitler is actually drawn to some of the party's ideas about the atrocities of the Weimar Republic. They saw the stab in the back myth, the November criminals, a great German race, and he's really drawn to this as well. At the very first meeting that he attends and he spies on, there's 23 people at that meeting. Within a year later, in the end of 1920, there are 3,000. Very quickly, by September 1919, Hitler joins the party, and he very quickly goes up the ranks within the DAP as well. By 1920, he's in charge of propaganda of the party, and he's in charge of changing the logo of the party to the swastika. He's in charge of changing its name, so he adds the National Socialist aspect of that as well. He is involved in writing the party's manifesto with Drexler, which becomes known as the 25-point program, which promises a great Germany. It blames the Jews. It talks about the Aryan race. All of the things that we see in the Nazi Party are formed initially during the DAP as well. In July 1921, there is a leadership contest. Hitler is the draw of the party. People come to see him speak. We see the membership go up, and it's all because of him, really. He was obviously a great orator, as we know, and we know that he practiced his speeches. He had professional photographs taken. He would build up the audience. He would go into a frenzy as he criticised the new Weimar Republic. So he criticised many things that anything he could attack based on the stab in the back, the November criminals, when the Versailles Treaty is signed. Also, when we get to the hyperinflation crisis and the French invasion, this was all ammunition for Hitler to attack as well. And the leadership contest in July 1921 leads to him becoming the leader of the Nazi Party for the first time, and Drexler is sidelined. By January of 1922, he has complete control over the National Socialist German Workers' Party. He ensures that the voting for a new leader is abolished, so he becomes the dictator, essentially, of that party. He becomes the Führer of the party from that time as well. So alongside his, obviously, revamp of the party when it comes to changing its name and its logo, and the party starts to become a more professional party as well in their bid to win power. So they start to have a a political office in Munich, a party office that deals with finances. And then what Hitler does is he embarks on a period of recruiting people who can enhance the party's prestige, enhance the party's power, the party's influence as well. And here are some of the individuals. So the top left, you had Rudolf Hess, and Rudolf Hess becomes the deputy of the party. He was an academic, university academic. Hess, in the end, serves time with Hitler in Landsberg prison. Hess is the one who's able to help him write Mein Kampf, so really important. In the top middle there, Hermann Goering. Goering was a former fighter pilot. He had big connections with the aristocratic circles in Germany, and particularly in Bavaria as well. So he gave that military experience plus those circles. On the far right, top right there, you have Julius Streicher, who was a journalist. He's the one who's going to found one of the biggest Nazi newspapers called Der Stürmer, which was essentially translated to the Stormer. Bottom left, famous, obviously individual for more so for later on his death, but Ernst Röhm, who'd fought in the trenches and ends up becoming the leader of the SA. And significantly in the bottom right there, General von Ludendorff, who was a German military general who had been in charge of the German army when the German army loses the war on the Western Front, and that really gave the party that powerful connection as well. Now, I mentioned Ernst Röhm becomes the leader of the SA, and the SA become a hugely significant force in the Nazi Party. They are referred to as the Stormtroopers or the Brown Shirts. They had only numbered around 200 in August 1922. They're mainly formed of working class men, as that's where we see the socialist side of the National Socialist German Workers' Party. But obviously they shared right-wing sentiments. So despite being working class, they had this desire for Germany to be great again. And many of them had fought in the war, had come home disenfranchised, as we said earlier, with the outcome of the First World War, and seeing that a democracy was taking over, seeing the communists take over. So you had groups like the Freikorps, who we mentioned in the last video, and the SA, who become really strong, as what we would call them as paramilitary forces. By 1934, they number around 3 million, and we'll talk about obviously that impact in the next video as well. But the SA are going to be hugely significant in giving the Nazis that control and that power and that sense of order as well, and they'd be used to cause intimidation. They were often criticised as being hooligans, but they would be used to great effect later on when it came to the Nazis getting elected. So, in the lead up to Hitler's first attempt to seize power, which is during the Munich Putsch as well, he starts to develop, obviously, his ideas about what the party should be. There we see, obviously, we talked about the swastika and the logo and some of the things that he would attack as well. But in 1922, in the bottom left there, an Italian dictator, Benito Mussolini, seizes power in Rome, in Italy, on what's called his March on Rome. So he physically seizes power. And Hitler is massively inspired by this. And in the lead up to 1923, to the Munich Putsch, all we've seen in those early years is those crisis years of the Weimar Republic. We've seen the right wing being frustrated and angry with the new republic. And they've used the stab in the back myth shown in the top left there. They believe it's the Jews. And this has only fueled anger and discontent and resentment towards the Weimar Republic. The fact that the Versailles Treaty was signed left Germany in a perilous position. Germany was seen to be weak. The leaders, that the fact they'd accepted the treaty and accepted the surrender in the First World War again, showed that they were weak, and strong leadership was needed. And this is what Hitler and the Nazis were preaching, that they needed to remove the current government that were illegitimate and to replace it with a strong military-focused government, as there had been in the years preceding the war as well. Triggered by that influence of Mussolini on his march on Rome, but also the hyperinflation crisis of 1923 leads to Hitler believing that now was the time to try and seize power. And that's where we get the Munich Putsch in November 1923. Now, the plan was to seize the Bavarian government leaders who were at the beer hall in Munich. Most famously, we had von Kahr, who was the leader of the Bavarian government. They were speaking at a beer hall, and the plan was to seize them as well. Now, they had the influence and power of Ludendorff involved in this as well, and obviously some of those significant Nazis that we've already talked about there as well, with Ernst Röhm and Hermann Goering. Heinrich Himmler is also going to be there. He's going to be obviously more significant later on with the SS. But that is the plan, to seize power whilst these are talking at the beer hall. Unfortunately, the Nazis completely miscalculate during the Munich Putsch. They don't have the support that they believed that they had. They thought the people of Munich would rise up with them, but they were mistaken. When they arrive at the beer hall, Hitler brandishes his revolver. He announces that they're taking over, and the SA come in with Hermann Goering, and they obviously seize the beer hall. The plan then was to take over the military barracks and to take over the rest of the city. Hitler leaves to do that. Ernst Röhm leaves to do that. But the problem is that Ernst Röhm never actually takes the military barracks. And that's a really key error in the Munich Putsch. Ludendorff is left to supervise the Bavarian leaders. They request to Ludendorff that they can leave to go look after their families, and Ludendorff foolishly allows them to do that. So Ludendorff has a huge part to play in the failure of the Munich Putsch. Also, the lack of coordination with the fact that Ernst Röhm does not seize the barracks, and the lack of understanding of how much support the Nazis actually had in the city of Munich. Von Kahr does not leave the beer hall to go see his family. He goes and rises the police and the local army. Hitler decides to engage them in the city centre. This again is a foolish mistake, and in the end, they are dispersed, even though they march against the local police and the local army. And in the end, many senior Nazis are arrested, a couple are killed, and Hitler himself is caught. Now, his punishment is arguably a bit of a mockery. He has a court case. He admits that he's guilty, but only guilty for wanting a stronger and better Germany. The fact that the right-wing judiciary are biased means that Hitler is only sentenced to 5 years. He's out after 10 months, and he serves his time in Landsberg prison in relative comfort. He is allowed, as mentioned earlier, he is allowed to have Rudolf Hess in prison with him. And this is where he has an epiphany. He has that moment that he realizes that the only way in which the Nazis are going to get into power is through legal means. The only way they're going to get into power is by getting elected. The use of force is not going to be an acceptable or realistic way to seize power. Unlike Mussolini in Italy, it's not going to work in Germany. So Hitler makes that admission. When he gets out, he's going to reform the party. But he also writes Mein Kampf, My Struggle. And Mein Kampf is significant as it lays out all of the political philosophies that Hitler had. That Versailles was an abomination. That the Jews were to blame for all of Germany's problems, and the Jews would need to be removed as well. It also makes suggestions about what would end up happening in the lead up to the Second World War as well, and the fact that the German people needed Lebensraum, living space for the Aryan master race in the East. So we're talking Poland, we're talking Belarus, we're talking modern day Russia and Ukraine. These are regions that needed to be cleansed of the minority or the people that were living there, the Slavic people that live in there, and Jews that were living there, in order for the Aryan race to live there as well. And that's going to be a key idea as we go through the rest of the Nazi dictatorship. Now, once Once Hitler is out of prison, the Nazi Party was banned after the Munich Putsch, but the weakness of the Republic and the bias of the right wing means that that ban is lifted quite soon after. And by early 1925, the ban on the Nazi Party has finished. And obviously Hitler has changed his tact. He makes that realization that they have to get elected, and he automatically and immediately starts to make major changes. He hires two new people for the party. He hires a treasurer and an administrator. He needs to make the party more professional and more organized. He creates what's called Gauleiters, and he creates 35 regions of Germany in which these Gauleiters would aim to gain support in that particular region. Hitler realizes that whilst the party may have had some support in Bavaria, they did not have support in the other regions of Germany, and if they're going to get elected, that was the way. They had to gain support across the entirety of the country and hit many other aspects of the population. They had to appeal to different people. He sets up his first female German women's order, which is meant to attract more female voters to the party. He also sets up the Hitler Youth for the very first time, trying to attract young men, young teenage men and boys to the party as well. Significantly, in 1925, the SS are created, and these become Hitler's personal bodyguard. And whilst they numbered quite meagre in the early days, by the Second World War, the SS numbered millions, and these are the crack elite troops of Nazi Germany. They were Aryan, and they had to prove their heritage of up to about 150 years, and they were radicalized and indoctrinated. In the end, the SS will become the more powerful institution over the SA. This whole era is often referred to either the wilderness years of the party because they didn't do very well in the elections, but also the reorganisation of the party as well. In 1926, there is a split in Hitler's party. In 1920, he had made the decision to refer to the party as the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the National being the right-wing side of the party, the Socialist being the left-wing part of the party. And he did have, as we said earlier with the SA, there were socialist aspects which looked at workers and workers' rights in his party. Now, when he announces those Gauleiters, the Gauleiters in the north of Germany, which was a north west of Germany, like the Ruhr and the north near Hamburg, this was predominantly the working class Gauleiters who were working in these regions. Joseph Goebbels was one who would end up becoming the head of propaganda, but also Gregor Strasser, who would be a high deputy within the party. Now, they wanted a more socialist side. They wanted to edge the party more left, whereas the Gauleiters from the south, from Bavaria, wanted to edge the party more towards the nationalist side. So Hitler had a problem, and his solution is simple. He calls all of his Gauleiters to the town of Bamberg in the center, more south of Germany. And at Bamberg, shown here on the left-hand side on the photo, he announces that the party will be more right. They will be a nationalist party. They will still be called the National Socialist German Workers' Party, but they will have a more right-wing thinking. Strasser is not happy with this. And in the end, Strasser will be murdered during the Night of the Long Knives in 1934 with a bit of revenge from Hitler. But what Hitler is significantly able to do is he's able to really put a stomp on any insurrection within his party. He's able to show that he is in charge, but he also is able to recruit Goebbels to himself. And Goebbels becomes instrumental and becomes the head of propaganda, which will be a huge factor in why the Nazi Party do get elected and voted in. So the elections of 1928 were meant to be a huge turning point for the party. In 1924, Hitler had been released from prison. He'd spent obviously that time rewriting the party's manifesto, reorganizing the party, creating the Gauleiters, creating the SS. broadening the appeal of the party as well. But the 1928 elections are a major setback for the party. They only achieved 2.6% of the vote, which equated to 12 seats. In the May 1924 election, the party had 24 seats, so they actually saw a reduction in their seats, despite the fact that Hitler was attempting to get into power legally and to get elected, and despite all of the reorganisation and reform of his party. So why was it that the party did so poorly? Well, this was a time where the Weimar Republic was enjoying a period of economic and political stability. This was the golden years. And the Nazi Party's message had not changed since 1919, really. They were still claiming that Versailles needed to be destroyed. They were still claiming that the Jews were responsible for all of Germany's problems, including the defeat in the First World War, including the hyperinflation crisis. But by 1928, many Germans, and we're talking 10 years after the end of the First World War, many Germans had accepted the legitimacy of the Weimar Republic. Stresemann had enabled Weimar Germany to flourish through his Dawes plans, through his economic recovery after the hyperinflation crisis with the Rentenmark as well. So people were interested. It all changes. In October 1929, the American stock market crashes. The Wall Street crash will have devastating impacts on the world economy, Germany in particular. Stresemann had always stated that Germany was dancing on a volcano when referencing the Dawes Plan. And whilst the Dawes Plan was sustainable in the short term, it was not a long-term solution. And as we said before in the previous video, it was all reliant on the strength of the US economy. So when the Wall Street crash takes place and the American stock market collapses, the American bankers and the American investors call in their loans, and they call them in from Germany. So what we see a period of economic stability turn to an absolute economic nightmare. The party in charge at the time in 1929 is the Grand Coalition, led by Hermann Müller of the SPD, and immediately Hermann Müller's government collapses over disagreements on whether to increase tax or to reduce welfare. The new Chancellor who is appointed is Heinrich Brüning on the top left there, and he's appointed by Hindenburg. Now, Brüning was a member of the Centre Party, and Brüning essentially inherits an impossible situation. One of the things that Brüning does is he starts to rely more heavily on presidential power, because during a time such as the Great Depression that ensues, we start to see unemployment rising at a rapid rate. By 1931, unemployment had increased to 5 million. By 1932, 500,000 people were homeless. So Brüning needed drastic action, and one of the actions that he puts forth is to increase tax and to not reduce welfare, but to cap welfare. Now, the Weimar Republic had always dedicated itself to welfare payments, and with the massing of unemployment, with businesses folding, with loans being unpaid, and when the major banks start to collapse, which happens in Germany in 1931, Brüning realizes that they cannot afford to pay out the welfare, so he tries to cap this. Now, it's rejected in the Reichstag, but Brüning simply has the support of Hindenburg, and he uses Article 48. We see the use of Article 48 be used excessively. In 1930, Article 48 was used 5 times. In 1932, it is used 66 times. And we also see the reduction of Reichstag laws passed, and we also see the sitting days of the Reichstag actually reduce as well. So this is the foundations of a dictatorship. We're seeing the shift from a parliamentary democracy to presidential power. Now, Brüning is a good German. He's simply trying to improve the situation of the economic situation, but he's in an impossible situation. At one point, he tries to sell off land in Prussia, which is one of the German states, to give to homeless people to try and house them. Now, Hindenburg, who is an aristocrat, he is a former general, he owns land, sees this as a communist idea, and he dismisses Brüning. Now, in his place, he appoints von Papen, and von Papen again is a politician, but he does not have the support. And von Papen has the ear of Hindenburg. By this point, Hindenburg is old, he's frail, and he's easily manipulated. Von Papen is able to manipulate Hindenburg to get his own way, and he is trying to remove the rise of the Nazi Party. Because what we see is in 1932, in July, we see the Nazi Party increase their seats and they become the largest party in Nazi Germany for the very first time, with 230 seats. Now, von Papen tries to pass another election. He puts another election forward, which actually sees the Nazi Party's vote go down. But in the end, the Nazi Party are too powerful and they are gaining far too much support. Von Papen still has the ear of Hindenburg, but eventually Hindenburg is convinced to remove von Papen. Hitler, meanwhile, is demanding that he should become the Chancellor. The rules of the Republic generally state that the leader of the largest party should be the Chancellor. But Hindenburg and von Papen are trying to prevent that. Hindenburg does not want Hitler to be Chancellor. But von Papen's gamble doesn't pay off, and in November 1932, the Nazi Party seats only reduced to 196 from 230. They're still the largest party. But by December, he has lost Hindenburg's support, and on the bottom left there was an army general called Kurt von Schleicher. Now, von Schleicher attempts to split the Nazi Party in two, and he offers the vice-chancellorship to Gregor Strasser. This is found out by Hitler, and Hitler removes von Strasser, and Hitler's power is increased even more so as well. But von Schleicher struggles to have support of the Reichstag. Von Schleicher is also fairly socialist as well, and this means that Hindenburg doesn't necessarily support that as well. At this point, von Papen wiggles his way back in, and he's able to convince Hindenburg that they should appoint Hitler as Chancellor, as long as von Papen is Vice-Chancellor, in the fact that they can control him. Hindenburg is convinced by this, and he ends up dismissing von Schleicher, and he agrees to appoint Adolf Hitler as Chancellor on the 30th of January 1933. Von Papen will be his Vice-Chancellor, but this is only in order to control Hitler, and von Papen is quoted as saying, "Within a few months we'll have him squeaking in a corner." They are very wrong. Within a few months, Hitler is able to establish a dictatorship, which we'll discuss in the next video.